What's up, guys, and welcome to another look into local history. Today, we will be exploring the 140-year-plus history of the Ross Park Zoo. Before we get started, I would like to thank everyone for the tremendous amount of support, especially from the handful of Facebook groups I've been posting on, including You Know You Grew Up in JC, Historic Binghamton, Binghamton Southsiders, I Am From Binghamton, Historic Johnson City, and Vintage Vestal. You guys are awesome. And a very special thanks goes out to Edward Brewer, who single-handedly saved me 10 hours of research and digging at the library and donated all the video and picture media I used in the video today. Thanks again, Edward. You are the best. For all the millennials still living in the mantra that Binghamton is a boring city, I dare you to check out any of these groups.
I triple dog dare you!
And you'll quickly see that what an amazing place it was and still is today. Thank you once again for all the support, and let's get this video started. 1873, here we come. (1873) in Binghamton. Local government officials begin talks about the need for an official city park and set aside $8,000 to purchase land. In today's dollars, $167,404.56, or 7,720 sheet pizzas from Nurchie's. A few years pass, it's now 1875, and a man by the name of Erastus Ross, a prominent bank owner in the town of Binghamton, decides with his wife Cornelia Corbett to donate a large chunk of land, about 100 acres, to the city of Binghamton. At the time, Ross had been selling small parcels of land in what he called Rossville, and in donating this larger piece of land to create a park, he hoped it would entice buyers to purchase and develop the rugged, woody sloped land faster than it had been going already. Ross and his wife officially offered the land to the city council on July 26, 1875. And on August 9th, the city recorded the deed, and it was the beginning for the first park in our city of Binghamton. On August 27th, 1,000 residents showed up to the newly endowed park and spent the early hours of the morning clearing away brush, cutting trees, making roadways, and creating bridges. And at 1 p.m. that day, all work stopped and lunch was served on the newly built tables that would mark the beginning of the new park. 1885. Binghamton becomes one of the first cities to experiment with a cable-driven trolley system, which ran from Washington Street to a terminus on Fairview Ave, and was a route for anyone looking to visit the asylum on the hill. 1887. The first electric trolley line in the state of New York is installed in Binghamton, New York. 1888. The Ross Park line gets a cable system put in place, extending a half-mile down Park Ave. A previous attempt to run electric cars up the hill failed due to steep grades. 2 years later, the line gets furnished with an experimental dual cable system, which used two cables running at different speeds, allowing the driver to go twice as fast on the way up and half as fast on the way down. The Binghamton Railroad Co. owned and operated the line and charged 5 cents per ride. It also leased out the entire park for $500 per year and made a percentage on all concession and show sales at the time. The BRC also built what would be the first of 3 carousels at the park, the first one opening up in 1890. 1894 was a good year for Ross Park, with the building of the stone pillars at the Park Ave entrance that still stand today over 120 years later, and the construction of the roller coaster.
What the hell did you just say?
Did you just pause for a second? Yes, I said it. A roller coaster at Ross Park. It was designed by L.A. Thompson, known as the father of gravity and the designer behind the Switchback Railroad, the first roller coaster ever built in the year 1884 at Coney Island. It wasn't like a roller coaster in today's standards. It was called a Switchback and operated under gravity power alone. Guests would walk up to the first tower, get on the cart, and coast 600 feet down the track to the other tower, where the track would be switched and then allow guests waiting at the other end to ride back the other way. This is where the term switchback originated. The Ross Park coaster would operate until roughly 1900, when it was demolished to make way for new exhibits. The next decade would be nothing but prosperous for Ross Park, with Sunday afternoon band concerts being held by the Park Amusement Co., a subsidiary of the Binghamton Railroad Company, and vaudeville shows leading to an overcrowded mess. It's like millennials finding out there's a sale on iPhones at Target. The winter of 1910 hits. park workers failed to shovel the nearly 16 inches of snow off the roof of the merry-go-round structure, and on February 19th, it collapses under the tremendous weight. The Park Amusement Co. promised us to have another carousel up and running by May the same year, which it did. A very interesting fact, the old trolley turntable that was located at the corner of Court and Washington Street was used as the turning mechanism in this iteration of the carousel. 1915, the iconic concrete bridge was constructed to replace a washed-out culvert from earlier that year. 1917, tragedy strikes again. June 17th, the carousel was once again destroyed. This time, by a 1 in a million chance, the structure was struck by lightning and was quickly engulfed in flames. Attempts were made to extinguish the fire with a garden hose, but to no avail. Once again, a pile of rubble stands in the spot of the once beloved carousel, and Ross Park loses one of its biggest attractions. Again. 1919, George F. Johnson donates a new carousel to the park. Its construction is completed in the summer of 1920, this being the third and final carousel and the one that still stands today. A few small events also happened in the 20s, with the building of a brand new children's playground, the first parking lot for the new automobiles, the old stone animal house repurposed as a new bandstand, and the zoo welcoming bears, coyote, and 25 new monkeys to the park. An interesting fact, the original bear cage was constructed using bars from a former jail cell at the corner of the courthouse lot in Binghamton. The Ross Park's first lion exhibit was created sometime in the 30s, with a lioness named Susabelle being the main attraction. This would be the first of a few lions to call the Ross Park home, and if you're interested in foreshadowing, stay tuned. Lions in Ross Park would become infamous in the 60s. Coincidentally, at the end of the 30s, the mayor of Binghamton, Charles Kress, a former prohibition agent, made it a mandate to arm zoo attendants with the addition of the lion exhibit and other possible man-eaters like the black bears. He thought it to be a good idea in case one would ever escape through carelessness. Before we end the 30s, I'd also like to mention that in 1932, the city of Binghamton replaced their aging trolley line with a new fleet of buses, and in an act of respect, a going-away parade was held down Court Street. The 40s saw the addition of buffalo, llama, and the completion of the Shenango Valley Railroad at a retired postal worker's home. I won't go into too much detail on this yet. It plays a role in Ross Park in another 10 years, so keep watching. The 1950s was a big decade for the zoo, but it got off to a rough start. In 1954, City Council was actually considering closing the park due to a declining attendance ever since the mass production of affordable automobiles. People had more options for entertainment, and the Ross Park took a huge hit. But of course, it hasn't closed yet, and the thought soon became just a memory. 1957, Danny the monkey escapes from his cage and is on the loose for 7 days until he is shot in the leg after being spotted by a local resident in a tree in his backyard somewhere on South Mountain. 1957 was also the first lion escape, as Timba, a 500-pound male lion, slipped out of his cage as the attendant was lubricating a steel divider. He was coaxed back in with a large chunk of meat. His freedom only lasted 20 minutes. 1958, the city buys the aforementioned Shenango Valley Railroad system, including all 355 feet of track for $6,000. 1959, a former military jet plane is towed to the park and placed directly in the middle of the playground for children to explore. The 1950s also saw the addition of a Ferris wheel and a helicopter ride. The price to ride was only 10 cents. August 17, 1961. The annual Democratic picnic is being held at Ross Park. Mayor John Burns ordered all railroad rides to halt because of noise while he was speaking. Just 10 minutes after the order, the locomotive driven by 20-year-old Bruce Johnson derails after the rear axle snaps in two, sending all 10 passengers flying off. Nobody was seriously injured, and a full investigation took place. The cause was overloading and high speeds. Johnson wasn't ticketed. Cannonball Express would run for another 2 years, until being replaced by the Ross Park Special in 1963. Okay, now the moment I've been waiting for. My whole life, I honestly thought the lion attack at the zoo was just a local legend my dad would tell me whenever we went to the zoo to scare me. But it is real, and this is how it happened. Monday, May 22nd, 1963, 43-year-old Guy Carey, a Korean War veteran, reports for duty and is assigned to clean Timba's cage, which he had done many times in the past. Little did he know this would be his last. Sometime between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., while attempting to clean the cage, Mr. Carey was struck down by Timba, a 500-pound lion. Struggles were useless as the lion began consuming him while he was still alive. Mr. Carey's body was found that morning by another park attendant clocking in for their shift. The Binghamton police were quickly called and Timba was shot by an officer, John Tallett, after Timba could not be coaxed away from Mr. Carey's body. Later that day, Tina, Timba's mate, was also shot by another officer, Thomas Rawl, for fears of bloodlust towards humans. Mr. Carey left behind 2 sons and a wife. He would be remembered as a compassionate man, a wonderful photographer, and a friend of all who visited the park. Sorry to darken the mood of the video, but it was a critical story in the timeline and needed to be told. So let's move on now to some lighter events. July 4th, 1965, another monkey escape happened, as a 6-pound capuchin monkey escaped his cage the night before and evaded capture on multiple occasions. He was eventually captured by park attendants and brought back, but not until scaring the daylights out of Mrs. William Liddick, a mother of 5 who at the time was sewing in her front porch window when the monkey appeared on her porch swing in front of her. 1968, City Council is torn as 22-year-old Pete the Buffalo is reaching his old age. His 2,000-pound body is riddled with arthritis and he has become mean in his old age. The mayor backs a plan to euthanize Pete. June 3rd, 1973, another train wreck. This time, only 4 people were on the train at the time. The train was rounding a curve as it did many times that day, but this time, the wheel undercarriage on one of the passenger cars broke free, causing the whole back end to swing out on the curve and strike a metal fence post, which knocked all the passengers off. A full investigation took place by the Binghamton Police Department and the Parks Commission. It reopened soon after. 1986. The Ross Park Special was dismantled. Many wondered where it ended up, until sometime in the early 2000s, it was discovered to now be at the Kansas City Zoo, fully restored under a new name, the Eagle. Although it doesn't cost 10 cents per ride like it did at our zoo, it still shuttles kids around and brings back the memories it did some 33 years ago. The 80s also saw a traveling dinosaur exhibit visit the Ross Park Zoo for a short time. I was very young at the time. I don't really have any memories of this, but here I am in the stroller after visiting the exhibit. My mom said the T-Rex terrified me, and I wouldn't stop crying. Oddly enough, Jurassic Park became my favorite movie when it was released in 1993. In the 90s, Ross Park built the Penguin exhibit. When I was in the 4th grade, our elementary school did a fundraiser for the exhibit called Pennies for Penguins. There was a 5-gallon water jug the school was attempting to fill up. And at the end of the fundraiser, as one of the teachers was loading the container into their car to take to the bank, they dropped it on the ground and hundreds of dollars in pennies scattered all over the place. What a disaster that was. I don't want it to seem like I'm rushing through the 2000s, but I'm sure you don't want to hear about the 10 or so zoo directors we went through in this time period. So let's stick with the animals. December 2004. A red wolf escapes from the zoo and is on the loose for over a month when it was found dead with a deer slug in its chest. Its siblings are transferred out of the park until the perimeter fencing is deemed safe again. 2005. The zoo loses its accreditation. Only 10% of animal exhibits have accreditation, so it wasn't the end of the world for the zoo. It did, however, make it problematic for its ability to retain any endangered species. The zoo regained its accreditation in 2009 after many improvements and efforts by volunteers. 2016, the zoo gets another train. Well, not really a train, it's more of a tractor with a train body over it. The Binghamton Zoo Express shuttles guests around the park for $3 per person, especially up that pesky hill everybody hates. 2017, 2 red panda cubs are born. In an attempt to bring attention to the zoo, like April did for Animal Adventure, the zoo hosts a gender reveal party and it was seen on national news on Inside Edition. That about wraps up the timeline for the park. I hope 2019 brings great things, and before I get a barrage of comments, yes, I skipped the Discovery Center completely. on purpose. I wanted to only stick with the zoo side of the property. Yes, I skipped the zoo getting renamed because like many other residents, I thought it was a complete waste of time. As always, there are 1 million things I could have added into the video, but I tried to focus on major events with a few smaller things peppered in between. I really hope you enjoyed this look into the history of the Ross Park Zoo. If you found any errors in my dates or locations, please leave comments below. The trolley system, for instance, was a jumbled up mess going through all the dates, so many articles contradicting the next. So for everybody who made it to the end of the video, give me a thumbs up if you liked it. Definitely leave me comments, I'd love to hear from you guys. If you want to see more, please consider subscribing. If you want to support the channel, consider donating to my Patreon. Any amount will help in a big way. And of course, if you want to support the zoo, definitely go to the zoo. And of course, consider becoming a member at the zoo. And I hope to see you all next video. Greg Baer out.